Uh, just about the Bill of Rights again, still, is there one of the 10 amendments that you feel gets somewhat ignored, but it has like a particular importance to that you see it in society or in the way that law is practiced?
I think at first blush, it wouldn't be that it's ignored. But that it's been shoved aside, and that's the Fourth Amendment.
Yep.
It
I feel the same way.
Because it is so easy for regular people, and that sounds like I'm being condescending. I'm not. I mean, people go, well, you always hear the technicality argument, and I have this discussion when I'm picking jurors all the time. What's a technicality? Well, what's a technicality to me may not be to you, and vice versa, depending on what the case is. But again, we get back to sort of the analogy about a football game where one team's cheating, and we're just going to look the other way at it, or where.
Here, and can you define the Fourth Amendment again? Just because
so the Fourth Amendment, the general aspect of the Fourth Amendment is that all persons shall be protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, it's fairly brief. And there's been a whole lot of jurisprudence on that people may think courts just make up, except that there is a lot of what we would call common law, a lot of old English law on search and seizure that informed the founding fathers. They knew exactly what they thought. An interesting thing, and I didn't know this for a long time, but we see this on TV all the time. And of course, it's a big deal now about people getting hurt, but when police officers break a door down, and we've heard a lot about no-knock warrants.
Yes.
And we've heard a lot about, going in the middle of the night. All those things are what they are, and they're, you can have lots of different opinions and it depends on the facts. But in, post Magna Carta England, you had to announce yourself.
Right.
It was considered the law that you announced yourself if you were a sheriff and you were trying to go in and get somebody, and you were never allowed to breach someone's home at night.
Yes.
Now,
yes,
there may be a little more practical reasons for that in the 12th or 13th century or whatever, than there are today, because they didn't have electricity and things of that nature. But I don't think it's that much different. People are more likely to get hurt at night.
Yes.
Because they don't know who's coming in their house. It doesn't matter if they're a criminal or not. It's dangerous for the police officer.
Mm-hmm.
The no-knock thing is just, I think, a nod to the privacy and dominion that you have, that we expect over our residents. And so those things existed for a long time. But where we're at on the Fourth Amendment now is that there's so many exceptions to the warrant requirement. There's so many exceptions when things are not done correctly. The biggest thing right now is the good faith exception. That if a police officer commits an act that is violative of Fourth Amendment law, but did it in good faith, in other words, they were relying on information that at one time wasn't violative of Fourth Amendment law, or there's some other different aspects to it where they're relying on something and they just weren't intentionally out there breaking the law, that we're going to say it's okay. And the whole thought behind that process is that we shouldn't punish good cops for making mistakes. Laudable, understandable. Problem is again, we get into a slippery slope. Okay, you got good cops that make mistakes. Then you got people that want to cut corners, and then it's in everything. It isn't just police officers. It's any realm of life. People are going to cut corners, and so the Fourth Amendment gets completely watered down, and what's reasonable and unreasonable changes over the years, as is okay. That's what the Constitution does, but it pretty much the Fourth Amendment has been eviscerated. Certainly in our mobile society, if you're in a vehicle, if you're in on public transit, your right to be protected from search and seizure is basically zero, and that's. I mean, you won't get any argument from prosecutors about that. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, Some people believe that's okay, and some people don't. And because it's hard to argue a suppression issue because to a layman, because they'll go, well, they had something illegal, so why does it matter? I mean,
or even if they don't, there's
well,
there's plenty of people who do get
here's the
searched
deal.
and they
Here's
don't
the
have
deal,
anything going on.
Here's the deal, Kennedy. You don't know. Those people don't get arrested. So, what you got to think is, okay, are you okay with being, and I've had this happen to clients, and I'm not, and I've had police officers tell me these scenarios are wrong. Okay, this is not me putting on my criminal defendant's hat, where people have gotten pulled over and the police suspect them of having drugs, maybe, and they search the car. They pull it, and a lot of times this happens when people are moving from one place to another, and they'll have the car packed full of stuff, and they'll pull everything out of the car. They don't find any drugs. Mm-hmm. They go, oh, sorry. Then they get in their car and they drive off, and all their stuff's out on the highway. Okay. Now, again, I've talked to a lot of retired cops, a lot of cops that said, no, that's wrong. If you get that far, you at least have to put it back in the car, but how many times does that happen? I'm not going to know about it because I'm not representing them, because they don't get charged with anything, and they're not going to say anything. They're just glad they're not in prison.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing. The imbalance of power there is very, very obvious.
It is, but it's hard, and I understand that. If you're talking to somebody that's never been in that position, they go, well, just don't carry dope. You don't have to worry about it. And it's hard, and they operate. What's the other saying is that if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to hide. Okay, and I spend a lot of times when I'm talking to jurors going, okay, wait a minute. I understand that theory. I mean, the problem is that the Constitution is the law of the land. Mm-hmm. It is there. Its core foundation reason was to protect you from the government. Right. Okay. Yeah. Whoever you are, it protects you from the government, because the theory was, if we protect everyone from the government, then everyone is protected from the government. Yeah. And you can't protect the innocent person without protecting the guilty person, because you're putting the cart before the horse. Right. People labor under this illusion that guilty people get charged with crimes and they're just walking away from it wholesale. I can tell you, I'm a pretty good lawyer. I don't see that happen much. Okay. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody get acquitted that, I may have an opinion on what they did, but for some reason the jury didn't believe what the state said. But that's the exception rather than the rule. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, we are arguing over whether things were done right. We're arguing over what's going to happen to someone. We're not arguing over whether they did anything wrong. It's about as likely that an innocent person will go to jail than a guilty person will walk totally away. It truly is, and that should scare people to death.
The prisoner's dilemma is there, right? If you're facing a charge for 10 years for possession, but you can plea out for 2 or something along those lines. There's a lot of people who don't have the economic means to be able to represent themselves or mount a defense, even if they're innocent, and they'll take the time.
Oh yeah. They that happens all the time, and sometimes it's a little murkier than that. A lot of times it's a situation where someone's not guilty of what they're charged with, but they put themselves in a situation in which illegal things were happening. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You kind of this moral guilt that they're cognizant of, that they go, I have to do something on this because it's going to look bad for me, and it isn't that I'm lily white on it. But unfortunately, that shouldn't really be the choice. We are extremely worried in this community, in this country, about letting people that are guilty go free. And I just want to tell people that it just doesn't happen for hardly ever. And when it does, it's almost always for a good reason. And it's just so much more likely that by feeling that way, we end up trapping people that really aren't guilty.
Yeah.
I'm all about, and I've actually had no law enforcement officers ask me about this because I think they know me well enough that they're not worried about it. But like in my campaign, I'm all about if someone did the crime, they do the time.
Yeah.
I've sure had a lot more people spend me a bill of goods than anybody that's not a defense lawyer. So I mean, I'm pretty good at judging, I think, whether or not they're trying to pull a fast one on us. And some people need to go to prison for a long time, some people don't, and you just got to figure those things out. But anyone that thinks that if you go to trial that you have a presumption of innocence has never been to trial. Okay, the whole system is set up for you to have to fight your way out of, instead of the state to have to fight to convict you.
Yeah.
And it probably always has been. It wasn't supposed to be that way, because the founding fathers saw the tragedy of that in the inquisitorial systems in Europe and in England, and that they didn't want that. Now, the dilemma is that they couldn't see forward to the rise of population, the rise of professional policing, which didn't exist back then. Mm-hmm. Very little crime got prosecuted in the 1700s. So I mean, it's a different system, a different story, and it's going to be treated differently. So I mean, I think that's okay. I mean, I don't think it's a problem that we charge and convict people with crimes. I think it's just a problem that anybody that ends up in the courtroom in a criminal case, there's a large number of people that dismiss the possibility they're innocent.
Right.
And that's sad. That's tragic. It probably wouldn't change a whole lot if people would just look at it the right way. We just might eliminate that small but important subsection of people that probably don't get a fair trial.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about, policing and the Fourth Amendment in itself. And I think to be a representative, a peace officer who's actually their charge is to protect and serve. So it truly is a calling. And that is a high bar, and it asks a lot for the officers to put their lives on the line for the general public. Right. And they take that oath, and I think they take it very seriously. And so it makes sense that there would be a very high bar for them to uphold in order to best serve the population of the public. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we should pay police officers a lot more money, and their accountability level should be very high. It shouldn't be disparate. It shouldn't be that, we don't pay them very much, so we're not going to really hold them accountable. And it shouldn't be we should hold them so accountable even though we don't want to pay them enough. Yeah, there's a lot of police officers that get in it, and they're going to do a great job whether they even get a paycheck or not. But that's humanly unrealistic to expect everybody to do that. I mean, at some point in time, there's got to be value shown to you by society for your job, and I don't think police officers really get that from the right source, because you don't want the source of their job satisfaction to be the power they hold over people. You want their source of satisfaction to believe that the community respects them and values them.
Yeah.
And it can be done. It has been done before in this country, and it can be done. Whether we get back to it, I mean, we got to quit looking at each other as the enemy, and instead look at each other as allies. And we are going to eliminate the enemies among us, but that we're not enemies just because we are having contact with each other, which I think is
building trust among communities and the people who protect us. Yeah.
Sure.
I love that. Oh,